The auction yard pulsed with noise and movement, a place where lives were measured in numbers barked by a fast-talking man and decided with a flick of another's hand. Dust hung in the air, stirred by restless hooves and shifting boots, while the smell of sweat and hay clung to the rough wooden rails. Beneath the clamor, a thin donkey foal stood tied to a splintered post, so small that the rope around his neck looked far too heavy for him. His body was frail, ribs pressing against skin that should have been soft and full, but hunger and neglect had hollowed him. His ears drooped as though the weight of the world had already bent him low, and though his eyes still searched, they carried a dull haze that spoke of weariness beyond his age. Buyers walked past without slowing. Some glanced at him with a faint curl of amusement. Others ignored him altogether, their attention fixed on larger animals promised to bring strength, work, or profit. A boy pointed at the foal and laughed, asking his father if anyone would waste even a coin on that broken scrap. The father shook his head, muttering something about pity, and guided the boy away. The foal's legs trembled as he shifted, yet he made no sound, no cry. Silence was his only shield, though it made him invisible in a world where noise and strength commanded worth. The auctioneer's voice rose, hammering like iron on an anvil as another lot was dragged forward. The foal's turn crept closer with each strike of that booming voice. He lowered his head, ears flicking back at the chaos, as though bracing for a storm he could not outrun. Somewhere deep within him, a memory stirred, of warmth once felt, of a mother's nudge, of a time before abandonment. But memory was fleeting here. What mattered in this place was what could be sold, and no one seemed to see him as more than a shadow at the edge of the pen. Near the rails, a woman stood watching, her arms folded against the biting wind that swept across the yard. Her name was Anna, though few here cared to know her. She had come with no intention of bidding, only curiosity, perhaps the faintest whisper of habit after years of rescuing small animals when chance allowed. Life had not been easy for her. Scars hidden beneath her calm face told of battles fought and losses endured. She had once promised herself she would stop taking on more pain, stop trying to mend lives that the world had already discarded. Yet her gaze lingered on the foal, as though some unseen tether pulled her eyes toward him. Anna saw what others ignored, the faint spark in the foal's eyes that refused to extinguish, the fragile rise and fall of his chest as he clung to life with quiet defiance. She remembered another time, another animal, one she had failed to save. The echo of that loss pressed against her ribs, sharp enough to draw breath from her lungs. She looked away, trying to bury the surge of memory, but her attention drifted back again and again, like waves that cannot help but return to shore. The auctioneer finally waved toward the foal, his tone shifting to mockery. Next lot, this little fellow. Barely a mouthful of work in him. Who'll start me off? Do I hear a bid? Anyone? His voice bounced against the walls, but no hands lifted. A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Not worth the rope around his neck." Another added, "He won't last the winter." The auctioneer chuckled and tried again, lowering the number, but still no one moved. The foal shifted uneasily, rope tugging at his fragile neck, and his thin legs buckled slightly under him. Anna's chest tightened. The cruelty of the words, the dismissive laughter, echoed in her ears louder than the auctioneer's call. She saw the foal stumble and struggle to remain standing. Dust clung to his damp coat as his knees quivered. For a breath, she thought he might fall and never rise again. Her fingers curled into her sleeves as though she could hold herself back, but her heart raced with urgency. She whispered beneath her breath, though no one could hear, "Hold on, little one." The crowd began to shift restlessly, eager to move past this spectacle and on to stronger animals that might fatten their pockets. The auctioneer sighed, exaggerated, rolling his eyes. "Come now, folks, surely someone wants him. A few coins, that's all. Think of it, cheap hide, maybe some meat." His words struck Anna like stones. The foal's life reduced to scraps, his existence balanced on the edge of mockery. The boy who had laughed earlier tugged at his father's coat, asking if they could watch just to see if anyone was foolish enough to buy him. The foal swayed, then stumbled. His knees struck the dirt with a hollow thud, and a hush rippled for the briefest moment. He struggled to rise, hooves scraping against the packed ground, but his strength failed. Dust rose around him as he collapsed sideways, chest heaving with shallow, desperate breaths. Laughter burst again from the auctioneer, cruel and sharp. "See? Not worth $1. Might save us trouble if he just stays down." The words burned through the air, harsh and final. Anna could not move at first. Her breath caught, her thoughts tangled in a storm of anger and sorrow. She felt the familiar ache of helplessness, the same ache that had haunted her in the past when she had watched life slip away before her eyes. Yet beneath the ache was something stronger, a spark that flared in defiance of laughter, in defiance of the cruelty that hung over the pen like smoke. She stepped forward slightly, though she did not yet speak. Her heart pounded so loudly that it drowned out the jeers around her. The foal lay in the dirt, his thin sides trembling. His ears twitched faintly at the sound of voices, but his eyes seemed distant, fading into shadow. Anna's gaze locked with his for one fleeting second, and in that fragile thread of connection, something passed between them. A plea of promise, perhaps both. She pressed a hand against the wooden rail, fingers biting into the rough grain as though it might steady the storm inside her. The auctioneer raised his voice once more, half in jest, half in impatience. Going once. Going twice. No takers? Then let's move on. Drag him out. Anna inhaled sharply, torn between silence and action. She felt every eye on the pen, every whisper of mockery directed toward anyone foolish enough to care. Yet as she watched the foal twitch, fighting for air, her decision clawed its way through fear and hesitation. Something deep within her knew she could not walk away. Not this time, not again. The hammer lifted in the auctioneer's hand. The crowd leaned back, ready to forget the foal as easily as they had dismissed him. But Anna's eyes burned with unshed tears, and her throat tightened as though the very air demanded her voice. The moment stretched taut, balanced on the edge of choice. And then the foal stirred once more, his ear flicking toward the faint sound of her breath. It was not yet enough to save him, but it was enough to ignite the spark within her resolve. The world seemed to hold itself still as she stood, silent, her decision hanging in the air, promising that this story was far from over. Anna's voice broke the charged silence before she even realized it had escaped her. Clear, firm, unshaken, it cut through the dust and laughter. "I'll take him." The words seemed to hang in the air, fragile and almost absurd against the booming noise of the auction yard. For a moment the crowd blinked, caught off guard, before erupting in muffled chuckles and shaking heads. Someone muttered that she must have lost her mind. The auctioneer paused, eyebrows raised, then smirked as though indulging a joke. One bid. At the lowest price. Sold. His gavel hit wood with a dull crack that sounded more like pity than triumph. Anna moved forward, her steps steady despite the storm twisting inside her chest. She passed men who mocked her choice, children who pointed and laughed, voices that told her she had wasted her money. She did not answer. Her eyes stayed on the frail form in the dirt. The foal's ears twitched faintly, his head barely lifting as though he could not quite believe the shift in fate. She crouched beside him, close enough to feel the shallow rise of his ribs beneath each breath. "It's all right now," she whispered, voice trembling but certain. "You're not alone anymore." It took 3 men to lift the foal into the trailer. He offered no resistance, too weak to fight, too tired to care. His weight felt insubstantial, as though emptiness itself had been carried. When the doors closed, the world of noise, ridicule, and mockery vanished behind metal. In the sudden quiet, Anna leaned against the side of the trailer, her breath slow, hands shaking. She had made her choice, though doubt already pressed at her. How would she nurse him back? What if she failed again? But beneath the doubt stirred a quiet fire, a determination born of pain, and the promise she had made herself as she saw his eyes meet hers. The drive home stretched long, though the road itself was short. Each bump in the path rattled the trailer, and Anna kept her gaze fixed in the side mirror, watching. The foal lay crumpled, eyes half closed, but every so often an ear flicked at the sound of her humming. She had not planned to hum, but the quiet tune slipped out, steadying both of them. She imagined it as a thread, binding them together across the small distance. When they finally arrived at her modest farm, the sun had begun to sink, casting the barn in hues of amber and shadow. She opened the trailer carefully. The foal blinked, nostrils flaring at the smell of straw and wood. His hooves shuffled weakly when she coaxed him out. Each step was uncertain, like a newborn testing the ground, though he had lived long enough to know hardship. She guided him to a stall lined with clean hay, the space small but safe, far removed from the jeers and cruel gabble of the auction yard. He collapsed into the straw, almost immediately, sides heaving. Anna knelt once more, brushing dirt and tangled hair for his coat with steady hands. "You'll rest here," she said softly. "You're safe." The foal's distrust was clear. When she tried to stroke near his head, he flinched violently, pressing himself against the wooden wall. Anna pulled back, respecting the barrier, though her heart ached. She knew this language, the instinct of an animal that had been hurt too often. She did not press. Instead, she filled a small bucket with water, placing it close enough for him to reach without fear. For food, she set down a careful portion, not too much at once, for his frail body could not handle plenty after such hunger. She stepped back, allowing silence to work where words could not. Hours passed in small rituals, checking wounds, cleaning dirt from sores, offering handfuls of hay. Each time she moved too close, the foal tensed. Each time she retreated, he relaxed slightly, eyes flicking in cautious observation. Anna spoke little, but when she did, her tone was soft, even a constant stream of reassurance without expectation. She told him he was safe, that no one would laugh here. They did not have to fear the sound of the gavel anymore. He did not understand her words, yet something in her calm presence wove into his fragile spirit. As night deepened, storm clouds gathered. The first drops tapped against the barn roof, rhythmic and cool. Anna pulled a blanket around her shoulders, refusing to leave the stall. She sat on a low stool watching him breathe. In that steady rhythm, she felt the weight of her decision. She thought of her past, of the animal she had once failed to save. The memory returned sharply, helpless hands, shallow breath fading to stillness, the guilt that had lodged like stone in her chest ever since. This foal was different, but the wound was the same, a scar reopened by his trembling body. She closed her eyes, whispering again, "Not this time. I won't let it happen again." The foal stirred, lifting his head. His ears flicked at the sound of her voice. Slowly, cautiously, his dark eyes fixed on her through strands of coarse hair. The moment stretched, fragile as glass. Then, almost imperceptibly, he shifted closer, his nose dipping toward the water she had placed. He drank, shallow gulps that dribbled down his chin. Relief washed over her, so fierce it brought tears, she quickly blinked away. It was not trust, not yet, but it was a step. For the next days, routine became their shared language. Anna rose early, bringing fresh water and small meals, cleaning the stall, speaking softly though silence often answered her. The foal learned her scent, her footsteps, her presence. He still flinched, still pressed against walls when she reached too close, but his eyes followed her with growing curiosity. She named him quietly, though never aloud at first, trying the syllables on her tongue, like a secret. A name to anchor him, to tell him he belonged. Late one evening, after a long day of tending wounds and clearing debris from the farm, Anna sat by the stall again. The foal was lying in the hay, eyes half closed, breathing steadier than before. She whispered his name into the quiet, testing whether sound might bridge the distance between them. His ears twitched, his head lifted faintly, and for the first time his gaze met hers without fear. She felt her heart lurch, fragile hope blossoming where doubt had lived. But the storm had not passed entirely. On the fourth night, thunder split the sky. Rain hammered the roof, wind howled through cracks in the barn walls. In the chaos, the foal panicked, eyes wide, hooves striking against wood. He bolted before she could catch him, squeezing through the half-latch gate and into the storm outside. Anna's heart seized as she stumbled after him, rain blinding her eyes, mud sucking at her boots. His frail form vanished into the night, swallowed by the tempest. Her voice tore against the wind, calling the name she had barely dared to speak before. Lightning lit the path in jagged bursts, but the foal was gone, lost to shadows. Anna pressed forward, desperate, each step carrying the weight of her vow. She would not fail him. Not again. The storm raged around her, but she pushed on, heart pounding, her cry echoing into the darkness. The search had begun, and with it, the true test of trust and survival. "You." Rain lashed against Anna's face as she stumbled into the night, the storm swallowing her voice as quickly as she could call it. The foal was out there, terrified and frail, vanishing into darkness with every flash of lightning. She clutched the lantern in her hand, though its flames sputtered in the fierce wind, threatening to die at any moment. Her boots sank deep into mud, each step dragging her backward, but she pressed forward, her breath ragged and urgent. All she could think of was his fragile body collapsing under the weight of fear and exhaustion, alone and unseen. She would not let that happen. She searched the pastures first, sweeping her lantern's faint glow across the open fields. The rain blurred her vision, yet she called again, his name torn from her throat, raw and pleading. "Come back to me." The sound was desperate, unrefined, but it carried her heart. Each time she called, she listened with every fiber of her being, waiting for the faintest answer, an echo, a cry, a shuffle of hooves. For long minutes, only the storm replied, mocking her with silence. Panic swelled like a rising tide. She remembered the laughter of the auctioneer, the jeers of the crowd, and the foal's frail body sprawled in the dirt. To lose him now would mean more than another failure. It would mean she had confirmed every cruel voice that had called him worthless. Her lantern finally gave out, leaving her in near blackness. She carried on regardless, guided by memory of the land she had walked 100 times before. At the edge of the pasture lay the old ditch where rainwater carved jagged grooves into the earth. Lightning split the sky once more, and in that searing flash she saw him, small, shivering, half submerged in mud, at the bottom of the ditch. His sides heaved, nostrils flaring as he tried to rise, but slid back with each attempt. His eyes glimmered wide with terror, catching the faint silver of the storm. Relief struck Anna like fire, but was swallowed quickly by urgency. She scrambled down the slick embankment, sliding on her hands and knees until she reached him. Her palms sank into the mud as she reached for his trembling body. "It's me," she whispered, though her voice shook. "I'm here. You're not alone." He struggled at her touch, instinct screaming against trust, but he was too weak to fight. She pressed her arms beneath him, mud soaking into her clothes, and braced herself against the pull of the earth. With a grunt of effort, she lifted, pushing with her legs, straining every muscle to drag him upward. The storm roared, water pouring down the ditch, threatening to sweep them both deeper, but she did not release him. When her strength faltered, she did the only thing she could. She called his name, sharp and loud, pouring into it every ounce of certainty she had left. Her voice cut through thunder, raw but resolute. His ears twitched at the sound, his body stiffening before loosening just slightly, as though he recognized something familiar in the chaos. His eyes, wild with fear, locked onto hers for a heartbeat. That heartbeat was enough. He ceased fighting, leaned just slightly into her grip, and together they rose, inch by inch, until she collapsed on the bank, cradling his head against her lap. Exhaustion swept over her, but relief steadied her shaking. She stroked his tangled mane with mud-caked fingers, whispering his name again, this time softer, gentler, like a promise sealed by storm. He shivered violently, yet his breathing steadied with each quiet repetition. For the first time since she had brought him home, he did not recoil from her touch. His body pressed weakly into hers, not fully trust, but no longer only fear. It was a fragile beginning, born in the heart of the tempest. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the earth sodden and the air heavy with damp. Anna guided him back to the barn with slow, patient steps. He stumbled often, but when she spoke his name, he lifted his head and found the strength to keep moving. Once inside the stall, he collapsed onto fresh straw, too weak to stand longer. She worked tirelessly through the morning, drying his coat, soothing his sores, and offering sips of warm water mixed with honey. He drank with hesitant gulps, eyes flicking toward her as if to measure whether this comfort could be trusted. Days turned into weeks, and the bond forged in the ditch deepened. He began to recognize her footsteps before she appeared, ears pricking as though waiting for her. When she called his name, he lifted his head, no longer with suspicion, but with quiet acknowledgement. He still flinched at sudden movements, still carried scars that whispered of past cruelty, yet there was progress. Each small victory, a shared glance, a cautious step closer, a brush across his mane, was a thread weaving trust between them. Anna, too, changed in those weeks. The sharp edge of guilt she had carried for years softened under the steady rhythm of care. Each morning she rose with renewed purpose. Each evening she sat by his stall whispering stories and secrets into the hay-scented air. The foal became her anchor, pulling her away from the weight of loss and into the fragile hope of healing. She no longer saw him as a rescue or a second chance. He was simply himself, and that was enough. Yet the world outside the barn was not blind. Neighbors who had mocked her at the auction continued to sneer. Some stopped by under the guise of curiosity, watching her efforts with smirks. They reminded her that the foal would never carry weight, never work, never prove himself worth the coin she had spent. Their words stung, yet she refused to answer in kind. She let their doubt roll off her shoulders, holding faith that time would tell its own story. Her patience bore fruit one crisp morning when she stepped into the pasture and called his name across the open field. For a moment, silence answered, and then he lifted his head from the grass. His ears perked, his dark eyes lit, and with unsteady but determined steps, he walked toward her. Not rushed, not stumbling in panic, but calm, deliberate, choosing her over the safety of distance. The sight rooted her in place, tears springing hot to her eyes. To anyone else it might have seemed small, but to her it was everything, a declaration of trust that no mockery could undo. Word of the moment spread quickly. A handful of neighbors who witnessed it told others, and soon people came not to mock, but to marvel. They watched in stunned silence as the once worthless foal answered to the sound of his name, crossing the field with a quiet dignity no one had expected. Some muttered in disbelief, others wiped at their eyes, though few admitted why. Even those who had jeered at the auction shifted uneasily, confronted with the sight of a creature they had dismissed now holding himself tall in the glow of care and trust. Anna knelt as he reached her, pressing her forehead lightly to his. Her voice trembled with gratitude as she whispered, "You came." His breath warmed her cheek, steady and calm. In that moment, the central conflict that had weighed against them, the battle between rejection and belonging, shifted. The foal was no longer only a symbol of pity. He was a testament to resilience, a living reminder that worth cannot be measured by strength alone. But as the neighbors drifted away, one man lingered at the fence. His eyes held no mockery, only thought, as though he saw something more in the bond before him. When Anna finally noticed his presence, he spoke, his tone low but certain. "There's a showcase in town," he said. "A place for rescues like him to be seen for who they've become, not what they once were. You should bring him." The words settled over Anna like the weight of a new storm, not one of destruction, but of challenge. Her heart tightened with both fear and possibility. She looked at the foal beside her, who pressed close, ears flicking, as though he understood. The road ahead would not be easy, but the choice was clear. This was no longer just survival. It was a chance for redemption for both of them. Anna had not expected the offer, and for days it echoed in her thoughts, unsettling her as much as it stirred hope. The showcase was more than a gathering. It was a stage where rescued animals stood as living proof of survival and transformation. Yet the thought of bringing the foal there filled her with doubt. He was stronger now, yes, but still fragile, still haunted by shadows of fear. To place him before strangers, before eyes that might judge or dismiss, felt almost cruel. And yet deep inside, she recognized the truth. Hiding him away would deny the fullness of his journey. His story deserved to be seen, not only for him, but for every creature ever cast aside as worthless. Training began quietly, without fanfare, in the same fields where trust had first taken root. Anna led him with a gentle rope, guiding each hesitant step. At first he balked, pulling back at the slightest sound or sudden movement. But she was patient. She never forced, never shouted. She whispered his name like a steady drumbeat, a promise woven into every command. Gradually, he grew more confident, his body filling out with proper nourishment, his legs steadier with each passing week. His coat, once dull and patchy, now caught the sunlight with a soft sheen. There was still fragility in him, but was layered now with resilience. Anna, too, found herself changing through the process. Each morning she woke with a sense of purpose sharper than before. Her hands grew rough with labor, yet her heart lightened. The foal had become more than a rescue. He was a mirror to her own scars, proof that brokenness could be reshaped into strength. When doubt crept in, she remembered the night in the ditch, the moment he had leaned into her arms instead of resisting. That trust, fragile and hard-won, became the foundation for every new step. The day of the showcase arrived sooner than she thought possible. The town was alive with noise and color, banners strung high above the square. Families gathered, children tugging at their parents' sleeves, eager to see the animals that had been saved and restored. Anna guided the foal, no longer frail, though still smaller than many, through the bustling streets. His ears flicked nervously, hooves tapping against the cobblestone, but he did not pull away. Each time he faltered, she called his name, and each time he lifted his head and pressed onward. That name had become his anchor and hers. When their turn came, Anna led him into the ring. The crowd quieted with curiosity, for many remembered the whispers of his beginning, the foal mocked at auction, the one no one wanted. Some even recognized him, eyes widening with disbelief. The announcer spoke briefly of his past, the neglect, the laughter, the night he was nearly left behind. Murmurs rippled through the audience, pity mixed with doubt. Anna felt her pulse quicken. She could almost hear the auctioneer's cruel voice echoing in her memory, mocking, dismissing. She feared the foal would hear it too, that he would crumble beneath the weight of it. At first, it seemed her fear would come true. The foal froze in the center of the ring, muscles rigid, ears flattened. His body trembled, and his eyes darted toward the crowd, wide with panic. The sounds of shuffling feet and murmured voices pressed in around him like a cage. Anna's heart ached as she stepped closer, kneeling so she could meet his frightened gaze. She blocked out the crowd, the announcer, everything but him. "It's all right," she whispered, soft but steady. Then, louder, clear enough to carry through the silence, she called his name. The effect was instant and profound. His ears flicked toward her voice, and his trembling slowed. His eyes shifted, uncertain, then softened with recognition. She called again, stronger, each syllable weighted with the bond they had built through nights of storms and mornings of patience. The audience hushed, sensing something delicate unfolding before them. Slowly, cautiously, the foal stepped forward, his hooves echoing in the stillness. One step became two, then three. With each call of his name, his posture lifted, his head rising, ears pricked. He walked to her, calm and deliberate, until he stood at her side, pressing his muzzle gently against her shoulder. The crowd erupted, not with laughter but with applause that swelled like a wave. Tears gleamed in many eyes, for they saw not just an animal, but a story of defiance against cruelty, of survival against odds. Whispers of the worthless foal were replaced with gasps of admiration, voices choked with emotion. Some wiped at their cheeks openly, unashamed of the tears his transformation had drawn. Anna held him close, tears streaking her own face, though hers were of relief and triumph. She whispered again, barely audible over the roar, "You did it. You're free of them now." The moment stretched beyond the ring, beyond the event itself. For Anna, it was not about the applause or the recognition. It was about the foal, standing tall where once he had collapsed in the dirt. It was about the bond that had pulled them both from shadows into light. For the foal, it was the sound of his name spoken not with mockery but with love, a sound that gave him belonging, that made him more than a cast-off. As the showcase continued, Anna and the foal remained the quiet heart of the day. People approached afterward, not to mock but to thank her, to tell her how deeply they had been moved. Some admitted they had doubted him, doubted her, but now they saw. Anna listened politely, but her focus stayed on him, scratching gently behind his ears as he leaned into her touch. He had no use for their words, and neither did she. Their victory was their own, sealed long before applause had confirmed it. When they returned home that evening, the barn glowed warmly in the fading light. The foal walked beside her with steadier steps, no longer the trembling creature of weeks past. He entered his stall without hesitation, settling into the straw with a quiet sigh. Anna lingered beside him, kneeling once more as she had in the ditch, her forehead resting lightly against his. "You're safe," she whispered, the words now more celebration than a promise. "You belong." The foal closed his eyes, breathing steady, the rhythm of trust carrying them both into the quiet night. Outside, the world moved on, but here, in the stillness of the barn, two broken lives had found healing in each other. It was not the end of their journey, only the beginning of a life rebuilt from fragments of pain into something whole. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing. I bring true, heartfelt stories every day.